Terrific. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Will Anderson, Baltimore County's Director of Economic and Workforce Development. We're glad you joined us today. This is part of our series with our County Executive, Johnny Olszewski, webinars on COVID and beyond about our local economy. County Executive has convened quite a panel today to talk about our region and share some insights about where we're at with COVID-19 and the business landscape now, but importantly, where we're headed, because we know we need to be exploring these impacts, but really look to the opportunities that we have in the region. And it's kind of staggering to say we've got 40 million people unemployed in our country right now, and that economists are telling us, we're going to have 6 or 10% economic loss, and there's uncertainty, but we've been through difficult times before, and we're already seeing signs of emerging. The Orioles are starting to put together some sort of season, and we will make it back. So what I'd like to do first is just say a quick welcome. Hello to our panelists. Hello to our County Executive, Johnny Olszewski. Mr. County Executive, how are you?
I'm good, Will. Thank you. How are you?
Very good. And Dr. Darius Irani from Towson University. Dr. Irani.
Be here.
Thank you. Scott Phillips, Managing Director of Legal and Business Consulting Services. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing great. Well, thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Tom Sadowski, Vice Chancellor for Economic Development at University System. Tom, how are you?
Excellent. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to join you today.
Thanks. And Michelle Welly, CEO of the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. Michelle, thanks for joining us.
I'm so pleased to be part of this panel, Will. Thanks so much for including me.
Well, we're really excited to have you. It's kind of a loaded panel. It's a big topic. I think many of us have been in some different discussions with each other just over the past week on some big issues. So what we'd like to do today is we've got some questions coming in from our audience. I'll invite our audience to either send questions in through our chat, the little cartoon dialogue bubble on the screen, but you can also be emailing them to Todd Dolbin on our business development team. He's receiving all of that intake and feeding them into us. That email address is businesshelp@baltimorecountymd.gov. But what I'd like to do first is ask our county executive to really set the stage for where we are. County Executive Olszewski has been fully engaged in every aspect of steering the county's COVID response, and business and jobs has been a big part of it. So we really appreciate weaving into your schedule today, Mr. County Executive. If you could kick us off, and then we'll jump into questions for our panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Will, and thank you for all you're doing to help lead our county in these very uncertain times. I want to also thank all of the panelists who are joined today for what I know will be a very illuminating discussion. Dr. Amani, you no doubt will have some staggering statistics on COVID's impact, as well as thought-provoking trend data, and hopefully some optimism, but we always appreciate your insights and your willingness to share today. Mr. Phillips, you are a man of many hats. We know that you have multiple perspectives that you're bringing to the table today, whether it's chairing our county's planning board, serving on the Economic Development Advisory Board, or serving as the director of the Mid-Atlantic Region Minority Business Development Group. So in your spare time, managing your own business and legal consulting firm. So many hats being brought today. Tom Sadowski, thank you for bringing an opportunity to elaborate on the interplay between academic research and business innovation, and for giving us a heads up on where we should be focusing in these unprecedented times. And of course, last but not least, Michelle Welly, CEO of the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore, clearly complete the circle and bring together the region's business, government, and education and nonprofit sectors. So especially interested in your observations about new emerging growth industries. In terms of what we're doing locally here in Baltimore County and local priorities in the time of COVID, my administration remains fully engaged in doing everything we can to promote the dual priorities of both restoring the health and well-being and sustaining the health and well-being of our residents, alongside as growing and sustaining our business community. When we first took office, which now seems about 100 years ago, in December of 2018, we issued a transition report that talked about a strategic plan focused on renewing our emphasis on small business, Main Street, and cultivating entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, these vital sector areas were among the first and hardest hit when the pandemic's economic shock waves came out. And so we know that we have to continue to focus on them perhaps more now than ever before. Our experience in Baltimore County has showed that both the initial programs at the state, federal, and local levels were very quickly overwhelmed. And so we did, in fact, step forward to try to bridge that gap locally. We jumped in quickly with business and individual benefit navigation. We recognized that we had small businesses falling through the cracks that weren't eligible for things like PPP and EIDL. And so we established, using our CARES funding, both a small business grant program in Baltimore County, where individual businesses were eligible to get $15,000 grants to help bridge their needs. We also created an artist grant program. Collectively, we set aside $10 million for business relief here in Baltimore County. We also have additional business announcements forthcoming. I don't want to get ahead of the announcements today, but we have an additional round that will be coming forward based on what we've seen on the ground. Leading that work is an internal business assistance and economic recovery committee. They are working with our chambers of commerces, our major sectors, to really understand what's happening. They've helped us do things like, in anticipation of the governor's reopening announcements, we are doing things like allowing for additional outdoor dining at our restaurants and bars. We've closed portions of streets to allow for additional space, and we're trying to balance that health opportunity, knowing that outdoor dining is even safer, but also providing that additional space for our restaurateurs. We remain in close contact with the business sectors, hospitality, manufacturing, college, farmers, hospitals, and beyond. With regular calls, we meet with our Economic Development Advisory Board to really have a sense of what's happening and how we can continue to support. So I want to thank our Department of Economic and Workforce Development for pivoting to pretty much being all COVID all the time, and understanding that we have to be adapting as the circumstances around us are changing. Working with employers who are still hiring, helping people get retooled in trainings, including things like setting up a contact tracing program with our community college. So we know that there's a lot out there. We have taken a leadership role in Earn Maryland. And I think, what I hope the panelists will agree and talk about today is, Baltimore County is taking a data-driven approach to how we best position ourselves to recover and thrive, that we emerge from this crisis stronger, nimbler, and more resilient, whether it's looking at a robust tourism industry for the region, not just for Baltimore County, but there's a lot to build off of. And we have those building blocks that we put in place in places like the Guinness Open Gate Brewery, where we're tying in things like arts and entertainment, with Catonsville being our first ever A&E designation just before the COVID pandemic. So we also have great anchor institutions. We have Trade Point Atlantic, Towson University, UMBC. And so there's so much out there that we're working to build off of, and I think that imperative to do so now is even more critical. So that's a COVID and beyond perspective from the local government side. But I hope that, again, the panelists will say that we try to be engaged with them and partners like them throughout this time, because it's really imperative that we work with them and all of you to figure out what those needs are and find ways to bridge those gaps. And sometimes it will be all government, sometimes it will be all business, sometimes it will be a partnership of government and business, nonprofit. We're open to whatever it takes. But these are tough times, but we're committed to, again, surviving the health impact and then driving forward to also come back more stronger, more resilient, more nimble from a business perspective. So thanks for the opportunity, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, County Executive Olszewski. There's clearly a ton of coordination underway, and I'm thinking of some of the meetings that you've just pulled us in and out of to get our higher ed, as they're reopening, that we're coordinated from supply chain to COVID testing. It's an awful lot. And just thinking about the industries, I see some questions that Todd's Todd's coming in with some questions as you were talking about the types of regional collaborations that are happening that businesses should be paying attention to. So it's going to tee up our conversation really well about what kind of industries have actually been stable or growing. And I'm thinking about the discrete pieces we've had with healthcare industry, logistics, construction, just yesterday, manufacturing with Scott was on that meeting, and as was Michelle, about onshoring, the opportunity to onshore, and the fact that Baltimore County is the largest manufacturing county in the state of Maryland. What's happening with our retail malls, what's happening with our main streets and restaurants. Some of the programs that the county executive has rolled out is helping restaurants who've been so devastated. And then hotels and tourism. We met with the hotel industry just this morning and heard about a 25% occupancy, which is crushing for hotels, but it's really impactful for our local businesses that are in that supply chain, that are our neighbors that work in those buildings. And I know GBC and the county executive was bringing this to my attention. GBC is hosting a newsmaker series on July 15th about the hospitality and tourism industry because it is so regional. So I think we know there's a lot of problems, but the idea now is to talk about where we go from the impact. So I'd like to start with Dr. Irani, if we could get a high level, highly respected economist point of view about, to kind of lay it on us about the numbers here. How bad is the impact from a business sector where the hits have been taken? If you can kind of help frame it at that perspective. Courtney might have to unmute you. Courtney, can you get to Darius, please? There we go.
Well, thank you very much. So I am the economist, the dismal scientist, as they say. So I will try and, keep remarks as brief and optimistic as possible. So we entered March with a, economic induced coma to sort of maintain physical distancing and to flatten the curve. And so far, Maryland has been very successful. One of the few states that actually has, managed to really flatten the curve and keep our, our infection rate down. It's been real positive. We've had one of the few states that have mandatory mask requirements or face coverings since mid-April. And so when we look around the nation, we see other states that opened early that didn't require masking. We see that basically they're actually going to perhaps have a setback in their reopening. So, when we look at Maryland, we think of it as a model. We look at Baltimore County, we think of it as a model in terms of its impacts. So let me just give you kind of some big numbers and then talk a little bit about some of the underlying assumptions very briefly. So real GDP for the nation is probably going to be minus 4% for this year. In 21, it'll probably be about 3.3%. 22, it'll be 2.1%. Unemployment will probably be double digits at the end of this year, about 17%. It'll fall to 8% in 21, and then 22, it'll be 7%. We don't expect the economy to recover to where it was until the mid-decade. That being said, there are obviously, we are in a sort of what they call a Nike swoosh recovery, meaning basically we had a very steep decline because of the requirements to close. And then we'll have a slow recovery because basically that opening is being dictated by policy. It's not being dictated by animal spirits. It's being dictated by the fact that we're opening restaurants on a 50%, 75%, 100% level, slowly but surely, as long as certain gates are being met in terms of basically infection levels and those type of things. This is really critical to understand, is that industries that have a highest perceived risk of infection won't rebound until consumers feel really safe. And this is critical. So sit-in restaurants, air travel, especially business travel, public transportation, concerts, sporting events, those are going to struggle until consumers feel safe to be in those spaces. Many economists are predicting those types of businesses won't probably mid-2021, and we'll see some return to business as usual for those types of businesses. underlying these assumptions is that K-12 opens and that we don't have a second wave. Now, we're seeing it's rapidly changing. Data are rapidly coming in every single day. We're seeing new changes. So what I said today may be completely wrong tomorrow or next week. Even the fact that the K-12 reopening may be a bit optimistic, given sort of some of the recent announcements yesterday by the Maryland State Superintendent of Schools. No second wave. We're already seeing a second wave, perhaps in places like Texas and South Carolina and Florida. So they're having to, re-pull back. And even how the data are collected. So unemployment data, they're thinking it's probably 3 to 4 percentage points higher than is actually reported because of the measurement errors. So, I'm hoping that businesses can bear with us, understand that basically it is, a very fluid situation in terms of data, but understand that compared to other states, other localities, we in Maryland, we in Baltimore County are doing a fantastic job of listening to the experts and letting experts and data decide how we reopen. And that's going to be the best way to ensure that we have a long-term and sustainable recovery.
Great. So that was your happy talk
Yes.
version, I think.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I did hear some good highlights in there. So when you think about like those trends about recovery and emerging business sectors, where do you see the emergence, whether it takes half a decade like you're talking about, or it takes 6 months? Where is that?
So in the emerging industries, it's going to be tech. I mean, a lot of the solutions we're seeing are tech driven. Logistics is also a big factor. Many people have gotten used to over the last 4 months now do the grocery shopping online, have it delivered. Those types of jobs and logistic coordinators are going to be needed. Opportunities to make those more efficient are going to offer opportunities for individuals and businesses to really leverage. Businesses that can rapidly pivot to take advantage of rapidly changing market conditions are going to be able to survive and thrive in this new economy. There are going to be some challenges. What we took for granted in February and early March may not be the same place we do reopen here in Towson University in August or September or October. Things need to be are going to be fluid. Even video chat platforms are probably going to be much more prevalent, and there might be some new improvements coming about those. So those are opportunities that I see sort of going forward. Obviously, healthcare, even though it did take a hit, people were being laid off in healthcare because elective surgeries were being canceled, dentists and doctors' offices were closed, but individuals involved in the COVID recovery were there. We're seeing an increase in there. Health is big, so I say tech, logistics, and healthcare are sort of the key emerging industries that are sort of growing.
And you guys at Towson University are leaders in all those spaces, which we really appreciate. To see, to the county executive's point about he's got a strategy emphasis on anchor strategies for a reason, that an institution like TU is still making progressive investments and coming into the downtown core for when we get through this to drive business in those areas. It says a lot about Towson University.
Yes.
And when you mentioned pivoting and being resilient, that brings up, I heard Scott Phillips talking about that just the other day in a meeting focused on manufacturing. So maybe, Scott, if we could jump to you, because you're dealing with a lot of those businesses on the front line. You're giving them advice and helping them navigate really on the razor's edge with a lot of these small businesses. What are you seeing on the front lines about COVID and beyond for your clients?
So let me give you some context. If you think about it, cash is king. And unfortunately, for many of the businesses that I deal with, particularly the minority-owned firms, they've got to deal with the national statistics and the local statistics, right? So income, generally, white income is twice that of Black income. Net worth is, a third to a fourth, generally. So the immediate thing that we saw was concerns around having enough cash to kind of get through the process. Then we had the opportunity for PPP and EIDL and all those things. And that first round did not go well for the smaller businesses and the minority-owned businesses. I would say policies matter. And so the second round was better, right? There were allocations specifically to the community banks, allocations that went to some of our credit unions. And that made a difference because those are closer to the individual firms. There are two kind of scenarios that I saw. We talked about pivoting, Will. A number of the folks that I have worked with were able to do some sort of pivoting, particularly around PPE. They may have been food service providers who were in a distribution chain, who had access to distribution, who all of a sudden were looking at masks and gowns and gloves, right? Because they had those established relationships. And then there were others who didn't have those relationships and were trying to figure out, well, what do I do? You know, I've got 50 people and we're in a catering business, right? And I can't have an event over 10 people. So what do I do with that? And so I've seen both sides. One great example of trying to figure this out is Collins, which is a restaurant in Randallstown, who went from probably a 90%, come sit down, have dinner, to a 100% takeout. And in the midst of all of this, they've now opened a second location. So there's some level of resiliency in the marketplace for folks that have figured out how to pivot. But that's not everybody. And there's going to be a significant number of businesses lost. Unfortunately, not everybody's going to be able to weather the storm. But when I say policies matter, what we've done in Baltimore County to reach out to the smaller firms who couldn't get PPP, who couldn't get some of the state funds, to reach into that group has been good. The question is, how long will it last? How long will those resources last? Is it just a matter of a Band-Aid for 4 to 8 weeks? And in 8 weeks from now, we're still in the same position. And so how do they sustain themselves? I will say that from a career perspective, you've also got, particularly in Baltimore County, you've got two sets of folks. You've got a number of folks who are weathering the storm because they're working for governments. They're working for the federal government, they're working for the state government, or they're working for local government. And so in the Northwest corridor, you haven't seen, it's not dire, right? Because you've got a lot of folks with really, jobs that they can continue to do remotely. At the same time, you've got a lot of people involved in industries which require them to go out, which make them more susceptible to the health issues that we're dealing with. You've got a lot of folks in transportation, you've got a lot of folks in food service, you've got a lot of folks in logistics, all of which, while they're still working, they're more greatly exposed. So how we handle the social distancing and maintaining this level of safety. The whole conversation with the governor's task force on reopening, which I participated in, many folks were focused on, we got to get people back to work. And I would tell you, my thing is, yes, we got to get people back to work, but we got to get them back to work safely so that we don't have this second wave, so that we set the new normal so that we can continue commerce while it may not be as we know it, but at some level of normalcy. And I think that's going to be our next big challenge, because I see people out and they're getting very, very comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily going to be good for sustaining our economy and avoiding the second wave.
Well, thank you for that.
I jumped around a little bit, Will, but hopefully that answered your question.
No, it did, because I wanted you to touch upon, specifically clients, women and minority-owned businesses, what they were facing, and that whole emphasis on cash is a key one. I'd like to kind of come back to that, Mr. County Executive.
Well, I was going to say, Will, and I think to Scott's point, we are seeing that as we are reviewing and awarding our small business grant program here. Over 50% of our recipients have been women and minority-owned businesses. So we know, I mean, what Scott is saying, we are seeing on the ground, particularly in terms of access to the other capital that those companies and firms might not otherwise have. And so I think having a solution in place, particularly for those businesses, is going to be critical. We're doing what we can locally, but I think having those conversations at the state and national level, making sure that they're not left behind in what we're doing. So, I mean, on the one hand, we're thrilled that we're helping so many women and minority-owned businesses through this program. But I think to Scott's point, is it sustainable long-term? And then also, I think while it's good to do that, to have that help there, it also speaks to the challenges that they're facing. So it's sort of like good news, bad news in a way. But I just wanted to sort of emphasize some of the points Scott made there.
Yeah, it is heartening to see that we're over 50% with your program, Mr. County Exec, because I think you gave us a pretty high target to make sure, because you had been hearing it, just how many people have been left out of PPP round one. It was pretty staggering. So we're optimistic. We're still working through hundreds of applications there. And so that's been good. I wonder if we can shift and come off of that conversation about, Scott, you talking about we're not knowing how long things are going to take. And it's all tied into the public health driver of the nature of the recession that we're in is driven by health. So it's a good time, Tom, if we could switch to you and talk about, Maryland has been at the center of COVID and life science response globally all year. And I think it has been there before with polio and cannabis innovation, viral innovations. And when you see inside the system now what's underway in terms of pandemic research, what is the university doing to nurture that research along? Obviously, we all wanted to speed up specifically to COVID, but thinking about connecting it to, future manufacturing of innovation, not just for COVID. But can you give us a lens into that, the research side at university?
Sure. I mean, I'd like to provide a little bit of context too. When you talk about Maryland, I mean, the system itself, it consists of 12 institutions throughout the state and 3 regional centers, over 170,000 students enrolled. And we have like close to 20,000 faculty, 20,000 employees too. So there are a lot of people involved in the day-to-day operations and learning enterprise and research enterprise at the University of Maryland system. We do about $1.4 billion in sponsored research, an operating budget over $5 billion. So it's quite an enterprise. So first and foremost, safety of our students, faculty, and staff, are foremost in our minds. So we've had to react in a way that, leverages all the great minds and great thinkers throughout the system and great managers to make sure that students are safe, that we're still providing sound instruction and continuing that research enterprise. So from a reactive standpoint, it's been really important that, I guess if there was an operative phrase I'd use, it's like necessity has bred invention and partnerships. So where our institutions are really good at individual things, I've seen them partner in a way that's pretty unprecedented over the last 4 to 5 months. And that's internally. Externally, the way we're working with our federal and industry partners now, it's really turned up the sound on those interactions as well, because while we're doing all this great work, we realize the importance of and its value of getting it out into market and getting it out into applications sooner, as you had described. So, some of the things that, and Chancellor Perman refers to the system as a public good, not only for its people, but for the work that it provides. Look, University of Maryland was the first in the nation to test a human with the vaccine trial in partnership with Pfizer and BioNTech. We've worked with the state of Maryland on this testing regimen that went from 3,000 a day, and with the implementation of some robotics technology, we're able to scale up that ability to 20,000 tests per day. So UMBC, county executive, in my alma mater, they've developed some incredible rapid test technology with the help of National Science Foundation and in partnership with the University of Maryland School of Medicine, so that results can come back within a 24-hour period of time. Towson's doing amazing work in speech intelligibility corporate messaging, and social media stigma related to COVID-19. So all of this stuff over the last 3 to 4 months has gone from a great idea to a concept to actually being put into production and application. So while we're in the business of teleworking and remote, and social distancing, we've still been able to be productive and working together, not only person to person, but institution to institution and system to industry and federal government to make some of these important discoveries come to life. Where do we go from here? We're looking at, what happened last spring. We transitioned to all online programming. I think the financial hit we took is somewhere in the neighborhood of 235 million just in one semester. And, we have summer semester ongoing now, and we're trying to plan for the fall. Blended learning, in person and online instruction. So there's a lot underway for the day-to-day work that we do from a learning capability. But, there's important work that we're doing at the federal level and with industry to, again, make sure the realm and effectiveness of this testing is really enhanced. We're working with the Maryland Tech Council right now and the major employers in the biopharma and medical device industry throughout Maryland on, what are the immediate needs? We need samples. How can we share capabilities? How can we partner on new medical device technology? Right now, University of Maryland College Park put together a medical device challenge and awarded $50,000 awards to 3 different innovators from within the system. These are surgeons, faculty members, student teams, for new medical devices. We are in the midst of a app challenge where we're making financial awards available to student teams, startups, and recent grads for the best smartphone app technology. And that's everything from things that are going to help first responders to businesses transition in this difficult time and invite employees back or enhance employee productivity. So there's some really important work going on. And I got to go back to that element of partnership. So there's a lot of federal money out there, and we're all chasing it. And we're trying to team up. The Maryland Department of Commerce has been a great partner. Department of Labor and working with us, and we've put together a consortia to go after some of this money, particularly in the area of manufacturing, because that's where we see significant opportunity, particularly in Baltimore County, with your great history in that sector. We're in a new manufacturing and industrial age now, where we're going to have to make it here. We're going to have to reshore this capability and look at it from a supply chain standpoint, a medical device standpoint, and ultimately a biomaterial production and a vaccine development standpoint. So we have the capabilities here, and what we're in a process of doing is taking a close inventory and taking stock of those capabilities, connecting the right people, and making sure we're scaling up what's working right now, the possibilities for the near term, and over the long term, we're working together to develop the strategy. So if that device is conceived, tested, and a prototype is developed, that's all happening right here within the state of Maryland. And we can get it to market quicker for the benefit of the human condition, if you will. So this is really an interesting time. Resources are scarce. But right now, pulling together, we're able to take advantage of the scarce resources that we have, and I think put them to work for maximum benefit. And conversations like this, it's really important. So right now, we're even seeing some of our startups getting Series A funding. We're making investments in our own startups right now continually. This is not a great time to be out there looking for venture capital, but we see these ideas and their promise and the need to apply these ideas quickly. So we're trying to make investments in those ideas to scale them up quickly so they can be not only sustainable, but implemented for benefit to citizens of Maryland and globally.
As you're talking about how important these dialogues are, I'm thinking about a month or so ago, County Executive and Dave Hickey up at BD going back and forth about coordinating plans, and out of that conversation that that small to more conversation came
Right.
a real innovation for Baltimore County and really for the region. Mr. County Executive, I don't know if you want to highlight what arrangement you struck with BD, but it was really an innovation built on what Tom was talking about.
Yeah, it's great that, and I promise we didn't rehearse any of this before this conversation to anyone watching, but Scott first and now with Tom really teed up some of the things that we're already doing that really, I think are speaking to the realities on the ground. With Will, with your leadership having us reach out to our institutions, including BD up in Sparks, we were just sort of doing a touch point about how we can be partnering through this pandemic. And obviously, through that conversation, it was like, well, you make tests. What's your sort of capacity to help local governments? And we learned that they have full, complete FDA approved tests that they're, shipping all over the world. And it was sort of like, well, why not partner with an organization in our backyard that reliable, easy to get to, has all the approvals, has a long history. And so that sort of speaks to that public-private partnership where we're getting at least 2,000 tests, full, complete tests a week from BD that we are deploying at our 5 test centers across Baltimore County. And then anything that we don't need, we're hoping to have, God forbid there's a spike, but if we ever need to ramp up because of nursing homes or our employers or education, we're building additional capacity, but we're doing it because of the innovation right here in this region, which is really exciting.
I really applaud that effort. On the other side of it is the whole data collection and analysis and utilization. So Amazon Web Services and IBM, they've partnered with us in a real meaningful way to launch this app challenge. And UMBC's Alex Brown Center for Entrepreneurship is involved too. So we're trying to even get our students engaged in this whole fight. So County Executive, I applaud that outreach to BD. They're an important player in our ecosystem.
And it's heartening to know that these things are getting knit together. There's County Executive's Economic Advisory Board has a couple of life sciences companies that have jumped on and said, our labs are kind of gone dark right now. If you need our labs to support this, and it's really great to see because you just don't know. And I'm thinking, my own son is going to go back to college in Ohio in a couple of weeks. And I'm hoping that their county health officials and leadership are as tied in to the leadership in higher ed that we have here. It's a real blessing to know that these things are getting coordinated. I'd like to shift over to Michelle and really focus in a little bit on our industries, because I know you're really focused at a regional level at EAGB, and everything kind of got turned upside down with COVID, but tech has shown itself with real potential. And I'm wondering what you're seeing. I know Dr. Irani's talking about a multi-year recovery, but what are you seeing locally our opportunity is in growth in the forecast over the next year or two for the greater Baltimore region?
Thanks, Will. And as I've listened to the other panelists and the county executive and there's a couple of words that are really a resounding theme. Darius, spoke about technology. Scott, resiliency and sustainability, and partnerships and collaborations, Tom and you, county executive. And those are the attributes that really support our growth industry sectors. And the 3 areas that, if not already seeing growth in spite of the pandemic, they at least have the real potential for growth, are cyber and IT, particularly cyber, healthcare and life sciences, and logistics. And with cyber, we're blessed in this region. We've got Fort Meade, we've got NSA, we've got Aberdeen Proving Grounds, we're close to DC. But as more and more companies realize their exposure, significantly due to sending people home to work with home access and sharing your computers with whoever else is living in your household, there's a renewed focus on securing data. Even the smallest companies, anybody who has a computer and puts any data on that computer has to be aware of cybersecurity. So we work very closely with the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland, and it's really, a lot of it is an awareness and a communication effort to get companies to understand that everybody should be concerned about cyber. And we have so many assets here And the educational system, Tom, the whole system, University of Maryland system, is churning out those individuals that need to support the growth of that industry. And then we go on to healthcare and life sciences, which we've all talked about. We have, again, so many assets, and frankly, too little recognition in Greater Baltimore of what these assets bring. We've got amazing research parks. We've got private sector companies, and we have, federal labs. The life science industry is growing. We're reading in the national press, we're reading about the University of Maryland, we're reading about Johns Hopkins, about UMBC, we're reading about Emergent Biosolutions, a very strong company in the region with facilities at Bayview. So all of that really needs to be packaged so that we can let the world know, frankly, that we have these amazing assets here in the region to continue to grow the life science industry. And last but hardly least is logistics. Already mentioned by Darius. We have distribution companies in Cecil County, Carroll County, Harford County, Howard County, the city, Trade Point Atlantic in Baltimore County and elsewhere in Baltimore County that are hiring. In fact, they're having a difficult time hiring because they need so many employees. E-commerce, which was already growing before the pandemic, just exploded during the pandemic because you didn't have bricks and mortar stores to go into. Well, whatever the new normal is, e-commerce is going to continue to grow. And frankly, when you order something online, you want it yesterday. So proximity to markets is really, really important. And one way that I think in terms of looking at partnerships and collaborations, and this was mentioned yesterday, Tom and Scott, on the call with RMI, Regional Manufacturing Institute, with respect to manufacturing, is those logistics companies that understand their supply chain and diversify their supply chain will be more resilient whenever there's another major disruption, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's another pandemic, whatever it might be. So looking at the ability of some of these major companies, large companies, with 1 million square foot distribution centers and more, to see if we can work with them to analyze their supply chain and see what we can locally source, so that smaller companies, the companies that Scott, you're particularly interested in, both on the manufacturing side as well as the logistics side, can participate in that industry's growth, because they can participate in the large companies' need for supply chain diversity. Sharing workforce. Just this last week, I've had 3 requests from individuals who are working with companies interested in a Baltimore regional, a greater Baltimore location, who are asking about workforce. What's the pool of available workforce? One of these is looking at manufacturing too, or looking at logistics. So we need to look at workforce regionally. Individuals who are trained in Cecil County should be able to access jobs at TPA. A lot of that requires some partnership and collaboration. It also requires, frankly, public transportation to be much more robust than it is right now in terms of from a regional perspective. So looking at these types of partnerships and collaborations, and frankly, from a marketing perspective, shining a spotlight on the assets that we have and looking at the assets in Greater Baltimore and how we can also collaborate with the assets right down the road in the DC region, because we should be working in synergy and not as competitors.
That's a great point. When you guys talk about, sorry if there's a little echo there. It feels like this is the right time to rally around one clear thing, is we are a net exporter of talent, right? So all of you who are part of higher ed or have a PhD or are educators yourself, that has been the secret shiny fact for a long time, that we export talent. And when young people come here to get educated and we let them go, or our own young people leave, that is our greatest asset. And these attraction projects that you're talking about, Michelle, the companies that are coming to you, talent is number 1 and it's number 2. It's always talent.
Absolutely right.
And we're abundant in that. Even if we have, branding issues because of the wire or something like that, we have what people actually want, and we have an amazing location on the Eastern Seaboard and a high quality of life. And that's not fluff. That's all those are our real assets to build upon. And I wonder, there's a question that came in, Michelle, if I could just throw it to you about, are you seeing a change in the number of business inquiries that have been coming in to wanting to open or relocate in the Baltimore region just during the 100 days of COVID? Have you seen an up, a down, or a level there?
The logistics is the one area, and to a lesser extent, manufacturing, but primarily logistics is an area, again, that there seems to be a lot of interest in. And not only do we have these 3 requests that have come in, but also just talking to the economic development officers in the other counties in our region, they are getting much more interest. I think the healthcare life sciences will come. To your point, we compete, with places like Boston, with Philly, with the Research Triangle Park. But where we can win is not just the assets, that the research that's already ongoing here in the university system, but the quality of life. It's much cheaper to live in greater Baltimore area than it is to live in Philly or Boston, or even the Research Triangle Park in terms of what we have to offer. The same thing with manufacturing. You heard this yesterday, Scott and Will. We've never viewed manufacturing as being competitive. We cannot compete with the Southeast in terms of the cost of energy, in terms of the fact that they're right to work states and we're not, in terms of land costs. But as manufacturing increasingly relies more and more on technology, that's where we're going to compete. And manufacturers are beginning to understand that their future is in technology-based manufacturing, not in, the old assembly line, plant paradigm. I think, the other point quickly, right now, we're so immersed as we need to be, and Scott and County Executive, you mentioned this, and helping those companies, those particularly small and mid-sized businesses that are really, really struggling. I think once we get a handle on how to move them forward, which ones are sustainable, and as Scott, you said, there are many that will not be sustainable, then we can begin to, I think, look at what industry sectors are these sustainable small and mid-sized companies, what are they working on, what are they doing, and how can we help them build resiliency?
One of the questions that came in relative to that, Michelle, I'd like to throw to Scott. I think folks are seeing you as an advisor to a lot of small businesses, so they're asking a very good question here. Are you actually seeing on the ground opportunities for startups right now because of COVID?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
I would say yes, but that space is also being filled by those who are in business today who are pivoting, right? So they've got some level of past performance, and they've been able. So they may be startups in different, what I would call industries or product sets, but they have some skills that they're already bringing to it. And I've seen it. I'll give you one example. There's a company, unfortunately not in Baltimore County, just in Baltimore City over in the Y Comico building, who was doing 3D printing and was actually, I would say, struggling, right? This has opened up a whole new opportunity, whether it's 3D printing, masks and face shields and all kinds of other things. So there are opportunities that are coming out of this. The other piece that I'm finding really interesting is Black Lives Matter and the impact from an economic perspective with folks wanting to do business, seeking out opportunities to do business very specifically with Black-owned firms. And that's something that's within the last 3 to 4 weeks that I'm beginning to see, which is pretty, I just would not have kind of put those two things together. So there are opportunities emerging out of kind of this double pandemic that we're involved with at the moment.
Can you, Scott, can you share with folks the organization that you have behind you there that you're a part of with the chamber?
Sure. So the Minority Business Development Agency is a federal agency. They provide funding to centers around the country. I operate a center for Baltimore City. It is the Mid-Atlantic Minority Business Development Agency Advanced Manufacturing Center. So with with the work that I'm doing with the city, I'm working with a number of minority manufacturers from Virginia up to New Jersey, with most of them being in this region.
Okay. Well, thank you. Tom, I know you wanted to jump in there on the question about what opportunities are there because of COVID.
Yeah, look, let's look no further than some of our research parks, right? BW Tech, Potomac Photonics, they were able to pivot and they received a grant to develop PPE. There were two other startups, USM related, system related, that received similar grants. But BW Tech at UMBC, they have this huge cluster of cyber companies. Towson's opening their new innovation center. You know, the West Side Biopark, some of our other institutions. We're really looking to invest in early at an earlier stage in these ideas that today may be COVID specific, but may offer benefit by way of other applications down the road. The medical device challenge I had mentioned earlier, it was a joint competition held by University of Maryland College Park and University of Maryland Baltimore. These awardees, like surgeons actually working on cardiothoracic solutions to the ventilator challenge, actually developing new technology that could be the new company, the new big startup of the future, if not for this $50,000 investment to help scale their idea. So now is a time to really make wise investments, as Scott was saying, in some of these companies that have promise, because the data will show 80% of these great new startups, they stay wherever they get their first investment of support or mentorship, or they have a talent pipeline. So we keep looking for new ways to develop new internship programs or ways to share faculty so that there's a greater connection to these companies in the community. So our students see directly that line between their education and the way to either develop their ideas or their technologies or start the businesses themselves and within their own communities.
So Will, if I could jump in, because
Yeah.
I think your point, you said a couple of things that are very important in what I'm saying. Those firms that are successful have some level of mentorship, or they're working collaboratively, cooperatively with each other in some way, shape, or form to bring product to market.
And it's reminding me of Dr. Arani, what's happening between at the Armory, Towson Armory, between county executive and our economic development initiative and guys and President Schatzel coming into the space. We'll come out of COVID, but the kind of space where somebody who has an idea, maybe they're working with a Scott Phillips, or maybe it's a company coming from out of the area that Michelle's bringing in, but that Armory is going to be a brand new activated space where you can get that kind of wraparound first money mentorship or connect to your supply chain. I'm thinking of like in vocabulary, you guys have some pretty innovative companies already in that space. Can you paint a picture for where the Armory might be in maybe a year from now after that comes out of the ground?
I'm sure. So the Armory is an exciting startup. TU is the official moniker. But we're looking to be similar to, in Ann Arbor, Spark, kind of a modeling. The partnership between the university and economic development. But we're having an accelerator program, so we're going to have external companies, startup companies come in and as a cohort, and we have a wonderful new executive director, Patrick McCown, from JMU, who started up 2 successful technology companies in his college dorm. It's got some great street creds, understands the space, but is really excited about bringing entrepreneurship here to Towson University, as well as Towson in the Armory. Yes, a startup company can walk in, work with the county economic development individuals, work with our team, kind of figure out what's the next steps. It's a great place to bring in a prospective company that wants to locate in the Baltimore County and see what the assets we have there, the resources that are available in that space. So it is a wonderful space. So we imagine every year putting about 2 to 3 accelerator cohorts of about 6 companies each, going through that graduating, and hopefully the graduating with funding, and then landing up in Baltimore County, where they rent office space, they live, they make their homes, they pay taxes, they go to our public K through 12 schools, all the wonderful things, and they see the support that Baltimore County Economic Development and Baltimore County government gives them. And I think that's going to be critical. So we're excited. We see it as a catalyst for growth, both for the county as well as the university.
It's going to be great. It's really, Towson University has been growing as a regional player since President Schatzel came in, and a business player. This is really going to be kind of a watershed moment in our county with this partnership with the county. Exactly. I did get one question in from a participant. County executive was talking about our small business grant program, that $10 million fund. Have there been any grants dispersed yet? Yes, there have. There's been, I think, $1.2 million has already been dispersed out of the several hundred grants that have come through both the small business and the artist program. So they're working their way through the system, and when people have submitted applications that didn't quite meet the need, we're working with these companies to try to get them through a successful application. So it is moving, and we've got money coming out. I have a bunch of questions coming in from people. I think we've touched on most of what I'm seeing about reshoring and businesses that have been hurt. So we're short on time. I wanted to give everyone a chance to make a final remark. If I could start with the county executive before we wrap up. We still have a couple minutes to go here.
Look, I know we're tight on time, so I just want to thank everybody again for their partnership. Thanks for everybody for listening today. We remain resolute in Baltimore County to be an important partner, again, not just in protecting the safety and well-being of our residents, but having a resilient plan where we are thinking about what's next. COVID's challenging us to do things differently. I think Tom talked about how quickly firms and how quickly our universities are adapting. We're seeing government do that too. And we're doing things differently and more quickly than ever before. These are times that call on us to do things differently and think differently, and we're prepared to help be a partner in that work. So thank you.
Thanks for pulling this together, Mr. County Executive. Dr. Irani, any final remarks?
It's a long road to recovery. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we have seen sort of improvements in data. But again, stay the course and be patient. And again, there are plenty of resources available from the county, from the state and federal that can assist small businesses to succeed. So, make sure that you contact your economic development offices.
Thanks. Scott, any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would take a lead from the county executive and ask everyone to have an intentionally inclusive mindset. Because if we don't, we're going to leave some folks behind, and that's not going to be good for our overall economy. That's what we work on every day with the MBDA, specifically saying for those who are interested in finding out more about what we're doing with that, they can reach us at baltimorembda.com. And once again, Will, thank you for having us participate. Thanks,
Scott. And thanks for bringing the inclusive issue to it, because there's work that's underway and we need to do more. We appreciate that. Tom, final remarks from the system?
Yep. Look, we're going to continue to develop the best and brightest minds, and I'm confident that collectively we're going to come up with a solution to this that's going to get us back to normal quickly and do the best that we can to care for your loved ones. I encourage you to go to our website, www.usmd.edu, and log on to our COVID Research and Innovation Task Force webpage. That's where you'll see a lot of the work that we're doing both today and going forward to combat this deadly outbreak and to help make us all safer. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And Michelle, you're going to have final word for today.
Last word. Yeah. I just want to reiterate what has been said before in terms of talent. We need to keep the talent that we're growing out of our university system, our educational system. We need to keep them here. We need to import more talent. And one of the marketing assets that we need to get to, we're not there yet, is that we are a region that understands that economic opportunity has to be available to every single person who lives in this region. And it's upon all of us, including our private sector significantly, to make sure that those pathways to economic sustainability, personal economic sustainability, are open and robust. That is a marketing asset, and we need to figure out how to get there.
Well, terrific. I think I like the blend here of the reality of how difficult things are that Dr. Arani laid out pretty starkly, but that the strength of our region is putting us in a spot where when we bounce back, and we are bouncing back, we can come out stronger as a region. So I really appreciate everybody here doing this work. You know, behind the scenes, we've had a lot of folks on our team, Ellen and Courtney and Todd, Jessica, Drew, Kristen. Thanks for pulling together these webinars. I think we get some value out of these when we come together and just circle around, and then we all go back to diving into doing the hard work. So I want to thank you all, and thank you all for the folks that have been watching. It's important for us to have a bigger dialogue. So
thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
Well,
see you guys.
Yeah.
okay.
Thanks again, Will. Thanks, everybody.
Nice touch, Court. All right, great. Thanks, Courtney. Nice job.
Thanks, Will. It was tough with the PowerPoint today.
You did good jumping around. I appreciate it. All right, talk to you later.